What happens when you schedule your soul to death? Marcus Reed could answer that question with painful precision. At 6:47 a.m., exactly as planned, he was reviewing his daily optimization metrics while his coffee brewed for the allocated 4.5 minutes. Every moment of his 42 years had been carefully curated for maximum efficiency, each day a masterpiece of time management that would make productivity gurus weep with envy. But on this Tuesday morning, as he stared at his perfectly color-coded calendar, a disturbing thought crept in. When did I last feel alive? The thought lasted exactly 12 seconds before Marcus dismissed it. Feelings weren't metrics. They couldn't be optimized, measured, or improved upon. They were inefficiencies in an otherwise flawless system. His phone buzzed with the first of 37 precisely timed notifications. 7 a.m., mindfulness meditation, 8 minutes. Even his mindfulness was scheduled. Marcus sat in his designated meditation corner, set his timer, and closed his eyes. But instead of focusing on his breath, his mind wandered to yesterday's productivity review. He'd completed 97% of his planned tasks, a slight decrease from last week's 99.2%. The inefficiency gnawed at him. Focus, he commanded himself. This is allocated mindfulness time. But mindfulness, he was discovering, had an irritating habit of creating space for unscheduled thoughts. Thoughts like, what am I rushing toward? What am I optimizing for? The session ended precisely at 7:08 a.m. Marcus marked it complete in his tracking app and moved to the next item, dynamic stretching sequence, 6 minutes. By 11:30 a.m., Marcus was in his third productivity meeting of the day. As a senior consultant at Optimal Solutions, he helped Fortune 500 companies eliminate inefficiencies. He was the best in his field because he'd eliminated every inefficiency from his own existence. The Johnson account needs our time audit by Thursday, his colleague Sarah mentioned during their weekly sync. Already completed, Marcus replied, pulling up a color-coded spreadsheet. I finished it Sunday. We're 4.7% ahead of projected completion timeline. Sarah looked impressed but also slightly concerned. Marcus, do you ever not work? I optimize everything, not just work. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, even leisure activities. It's all about maximizing return on time investment. But what about spontaneity? Fun? Living? Marcus felt that strange flutter again, the one he'd been experiencing more frequently lately. Fun is inefficient, he said automatically. It produces no measurable outcomes. But as Sarah walked away, he found himself staring at his calendar, wondering when he'd started viewing life as a series of tasks to complete rather than moments to experience. The real crack came during lunch. At 12:30 p.m. sharp, Marcus sat in his usual corner of the company cafeteria with his pre-planned meal: grilled chicken, 23 grams protein, quinoa, 8 grams protein, complex carbs, steamed broccoli, vitamin C, fiber, nutritionally optimized, consumption time, 12 minutes. At the table next to him, 2 interns were laughing about something completely frivolous, a video of a cat that apparently couldn't even. Their conversation was inefficient, purposeless, and utterly joyful. Marcus found himself listening instead of reviewing his afternoon schedule. One intern was describing how she'd gotten lost, trying to find a new coffee shop the previous weekend, turning what should have been a 15-minute trip into a 3-hour adventure through neighborhoods she'd never seen. It was completely unplanned, she laughed. But I discovered this amazing bookstore, met this elderly man who told me stories about the neighborhood's history, and found the best empanadas in the city. It was one of the best days I've had in months. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. When had he last gotten lost? When had he last discovered anything unplanned? When had he last had one of the best days of his life? His phone buzzed. 12:42 p.m., return to desk. Begin afternoon productivity block. As Marcus walked back to his office, the intern's words echoed in his mind. One of the best days I've had in months. He couldn't remember the last time he described any day as the best. He'd had efficient days, productive days, optimized days. But best days? That afternoon, Dr. Catherine Williams sat across from Marcus in her therapy office, watching him check his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. "You scheduled this appointment for exactly 50 minutes, Dr. Williams observed. Most therapy sessions are scheduled for an hour. 50 minutes allows for optimal transition time between appointments," Marcus explained. "It accounts for potential traffic variables and ensures I arrive at my next commitment with a 98% probability of being on time." "And what's your next commitment?" "Grocery shopping. I've optimized my shopping list by store layout and allocated 17 minutes for procurement of weekly nutritional requirements." Dr. Williams nodded slowly. "Marcus, what brings you to therapy?" "Productivity optimization. I've reached a plateau in my efficiency metrics. I'd like to identify and eliminate the remaining inefficiencies in my daily operations." "I see. And how do you feel about your life currently?" Marcus paused. The question felt foreign, irrelevant. "I don't understand what you mean." "Life isn't about feelings. It's about results. Achievement. Optimization. When was the last time you felt joy?" The question hit him like a system error. Joy isn't. It's not a measurable outcome. "I'm not asking you to measure it. I'm asking you to remember it." Marcus sat in silence, genuinely trying to recall the sensation of joy. Images flashed through his mind, crossing items off his to-do list, achieving a new efficiency personal record, completing his morning routine in under 43 minutes. But Dr. Williams seemed to be asking about something else entirely. I find satisfaction in completion, in optimization, in—" "That's not what I asked," Dr. Williams said gently. "I asked about joy." Marcus felt that uncomfortable flutter again, stronger this time. "I'm not sure I understand the distinction." "Tell me about a typical day." Marcus brightened. This he could do. "I wake at 5:30 a.m. Coffee preparation and consumption, 7 minutes. Review daily objectives, 5 minutes. Mindfulness, 8 minutes. Exercise routine, 23 minutes. Shower and grooming, 15 minutes. Nutritional intake, 12 minutes. Commute optimization based on traffic algorithms, 19 to 23 minutes. Work productivity blocks with strategically scheduled breaks to maintain cognitive performance." "Marcus," Dr. Williams interrupted gently, "in that entire day, when do you feel most yourself?" The question stopped him completely. What do you mean?" "When do you feel most connected to who you are, rather than what you're accomplishing?" Marcus stared at her, experiencing what felt like a cognitive malfunction. The question made no sense. He was what he accomplished. His identity was inseparable from his productivity, his efficiency, his optimization, wasn't it? But something else, Dr. Williams said, was bothering him. "I don't understand what you're really asking," he admitted finally. "I'm asking about the person underneath all the scheduling, about Marcus, not his calendar." The flutter in his chest became a tremor. There isn't a distinction. I am my systems. My optimization is my identity. And how's that working for you?" For the first time in years, Marcus didn't have an immediate, data-driven answer. "It's efficient, successful. I'm the top performer in my field." I've maximized every aspect of my existence. But how do you feel about your existence? I don't understand why feelings matter if the results are optimal. Dr. Williams leaned forward slightly. Marcus, what would happen if you had a day without any schedule? No optimization, no metrics, no planned outcomes. The suggestion triggered something approaching panic. That would be inefficient, wasteful. I can't just exist without purpose. What if existing was the purpose? The words hung in the air like a foreign language. Marcus found himself checking his watch again. I'm sorry, but this conversation isn't producing measurable therapeutic outcomes. Perhaps we could focus on specific optimization strategies for my current systems. What are you optimizing toward, Marcus? Efficiency, productivity, maximum utilization of available time resources. To what end? The question struck him as oddly circular. To be more efficient, more productive. And then what? Then better efficiency, higher productivity metrics. And after that? Marcus opened his mouth and realized he had no answer. His optimization wasn't leading toward anything except more optimization. It was a closed loop with no ultimate destination. The session ended at exactly 50 minutes as scheduled. But as Marcus walked to his car, Dr. Williams' questions followed him like shadows. What was he optimizing toward? When had efficiency become an end in itself, rather than a means to living? And most disturbing of all, what was he rushing through life to get to? That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment reviewing his daily metrics. He'd achieved 94% task completion, stayed within allocated time parameters for all major activities, and maintained his planned nutritional intake within acceptable variance. By every measure that mattered to him, it had been a successful day. So why did he feel so empty? For the first time in months, Marcus closed his planning app without scheduling the next day's activities. He sat in his perfectly organized living space, surrounded by optimized furniture arrangements and efficiency-maximizing storage solutions, and felt profoundly alone. His phone buzzed with tomorrow's calendar sync. 34 appointments, 17 time blocks, 42 notifications, a perfectly orchestrated day designed to extract maximum value from each precious moment. But precious to whom? And valuable for what? Marcus found himself thinking about the intern at lunch, getting lost on her way to a coffee shop, and discovering an entire world she hadn't planned for. He tried to remember the last time he'd discovered anything, the last time he'd been surprised, the last time he'd laughed at something inefficient. He couldn't. His apartment was silent, except for the hum of perfectly optimized air filtration and the soft tick of his atomic clock, accurate to within microseconds. Everything was exactly as it should be, functioning at peak efficiency. But nowhere in this optimized existence was there room for the messiness of being human. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 12 years. He went to bed without setting his alarm. The absence of that single scheduled anchor point felt simultaneously terrifying and oddly liberating. He lay awake thinking about Dr. Williams' question, what would happen if you had a day without any schedule? The idea felt dangerous, reckless, completely contrary to everything he'd built his identity around. But underneath the fear, there was something else. A tiny spark of curiosity about what might emerge in unscheduled space. What would he discover if he got lost, like the intern? What would he feel if he allowed himself to exist without optimizing? Who was he when he wasn't measuring, tracking, and improving? The questions followed him into sleep, the first unscheduled thoughts he'd allowed himself in years. When Marcus woke the next morning without an alarm, the sun was already casting long rectangles of light across his bedroom floor. For a moment he experienced something close to panic. He was off schedule. The day was already compromised. But then he lay there for a moment longer, watching the light shift and change, and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd noticed sunlight. His phone showed 17 missed notifications and 3 scheduling conflicts. His perfectly orchestrated day was in shambles. And for some inexplicable reason, that felt like the beginning of something important. The session with Dr. Williams the following week began differently. "How was your week, Marcus?" "Statistically, a disaster. I missed my productivity targets by 23%. I was late for 3 appointments. I got lost trying to find a restaurant and spent 47 minutes longer than necessary on what should have been a simple meal procurement task." "And how did that feel?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "The restaurant. I ended up talking to the owner about how he'd started the business. His story was completely irrelevant to my nutritional needs, but it was interesting. I'd forgotten that people have stories that aren't related to efficiency or optimization. And the food was—" Marcus struggled for the right word. "It was delicious in a way that had nothing to do with its nutritional profile." "What else happened during your disaster week?" "I spent an entire afternoon in a bookstore. Completely unplanned. I read chapters from books I'll never buy, learned about subjects completely unrelated to my field. It was utterly purposeless." "How did that feel?" Like my mind could wander without needing to arrive somewhere specific. Like thinking could be exploration instead of problem-solving." Marcus paused. "It was the first time in years I lost track of time instead of managing it." Dr. Williams smiled. "And how do you feel about that?" "Confused," Marcus admitted. "Terrified, but also," he searched for the word, "curious. Like there might be entire dimensions of existence I've optimized out of my life." "What do you think you've been protecting yourself from by controlling every moment?" The question landed with unexpected force. I don't know. Uncertainty, maybe. Inefficiency? Wasted time? What if uncertainty wasn't something to be avoided, but something to be experienced? Marcus felt that familiar flutter, but this time he didn't dismiss it immediately. "That sounds terrifying." "Change often does. What would happen if you scheduled 1 hour each day for nothing? No objectives, no optimization, no planned outcomes?" That's a contradiction. You can't schedule spontaneity. You can schedule space for it. The idea felt revolutionary and terrifying in equal measure. 1 hour of intentional inefficiency, 1 hour of being, rather than optimizing. "I don't know how to do nothing," Marcus admitted. "What if nothing included everything you've been too busy to notice?" Walking to his car after the session, Marcus found himself actually seeing his surroundings for the first time in years. The way afternoon light caught the windows of buildings, the sound of laughter from a nearby cafe, the smell of rain that might arrive later. None of it was optimized or efficient or measurable. All of it felt surprisingly alive. That evening, Marcus did something radical. He scheduled 1 hour of unscheduled time. From 7 to 8 p.m. his calendar simply said, "Exist." When the time came, he sat on his balcony, without his phone, his planning apps, or his productivity tracking. He just sat. For the first 15 minutes, he fought the urge to fill the time with something measurable. His mind generated a dozen ways he could be using this hour more efficiently. But gradually he began to notice things. The way shadows changed as the sun moved, the distant sound of music from someone's open window, the feeling of air on his skin. It wasn't productive. It wasn't optimized. It wasn't leading toward any measurable outcome. But it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in years. As the hour ended, Marcus realized he'd just lived 60 minutes without trying to extract value from them. he'd simply experience them. It was the most radically inefficient thing he'd done in decades, and he wanted to do it again. 3 months later, Marcus still kept detailed schedules, still optimized his work and health routines, but now there were gaps in his calendar, spaces marked simply as life. During these unmeasured hours, he discovered jazz music, learned to cook without recipes, spent entire afternoons in conversation with strangers who became friends. He'd gotten lost exploring his own city and found parts of himself he'd scheduled out of existence. He wasn't completely transformed. The old patterns still pulled at him. Some days, the need to optimize everything felt overwhelming. But he'd learned the difference between efficient living and actual living. He'd discovered that the best moments of life were often the ones that couldn't be planned, measured, or improved upon. The last conversation with Dr. Williams happened on a Thursday that Marcus had intentionally left partially unscheduled. "How are you feeling about the changes you've made?" she asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Uncertain, inefficient, sometimes anxious when I'm not measuring and optimizing." He paused. "But also, alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible." "What's the most important thing you've learned?" "That I was so focused on saving time that I forgot to spend it. That efficiency is a tool, not a life philosophy. That some of the most valuable moments are the ones that can't be optimized." "And what are you still learning?" Marcus smiled, an expression that had become more frequent. "That I don't have to know what I'm learning. That not every question needs an immediate answer. That sometimes the best use of time is to stop trying to use it at all." As he left Dr. Williams' office for the last time, Marcus didn't immediately check his phone or review his evening schedule. Instead, he stood on the sidewalk for a moment, feeling the late afternoon sun and listening to the city breathe around him. He had nowhere urgent to be for the next hour. No optimization to pursue, no efficiency to maximize. He was simply alive in the present moment, and that felt like the most revolutionary achievement of all. The question that had started his journey echoed in his mind. What happens when you schedule your soul to death? He finally knew the answer. You stop having a soul to schedule. But the beautiful truth he discovered was that souls, like hope, were remarkably resilient. They could be buried under years of optimization and still emerge, blinking and wondering, ready to experience life in all its messy, inefficient, unmeasurable glory. Marcus walked home without consulting his GPS, taking the long way, allowing himself to get a little lost. It was the most productive thing he'd done all day. That evening, as he sat in his apartment with no scheduled activities for the following 3 hours, Marcus opened a new document on his computer. Not a productivity tracker or optimization spreadsheet, but something else entirely. Adventures for Future Marcus. He titled it. Learn to play guitar, badly. Take a cooking class where failure is expected. Go on a hike without a map. Write terrible poetry. Build something with my hands. Have conversations with strangers. Get lost in a new city. Sleep under stars. Dance like no one's watching, because no one is. Plant a garden. Learn to paint. Read books that serve no purpose. Love without measuring. The list grew to 37 items before he stopped writing. None of them were optimized. None produced measurable outcomes. All of them would have horrified the man he'd been a year ago. They thrilled the man he was becoming. 6 months later, Marcus received a call that would test everything he'd learned. His company was offering him a promotion, VP of Operational Excellence, a role that would require him to optimize not just his own life, but the lives of thousands of employees. It was everything his old self had worked toward. The position requires complete dedication, his boss explained. We're talking 70-hour weeks minimum, constant availability, optimization protocols that would reshape the entire company culture. It's exactly your kind of challenge, Marcus. A year ago, Marcus would have accepted immediately, but now, staring at the offer letter, he felt something unexpected: sadness. This role would require him to return to the world of total optimization, to evangelize the very lifestyle he'd spent months learning to escape. It would mean teaching others to schedule their souls to death, just as he had done. "I need some time to consider," he heard himself saying. His boss looked surprised. "Time to consider? Marcus, this is the opportunity of a lifetime. The salary alone." "I understand, but I need to think about whether it aligns with my values." The words surprised him as much as his boss. When had he started talking about values instead of metrics? That night, Marcus walked through the city without destination, letting his feet guide him through neighborhoods he'd never explored. He found himself in a small park where an impromptu jazz concert was happening, musicians who'd gathered simply for the joy of playing together. He sat on a bench and listened, remembering the intern who'd discovered the neighborhood by getting lost, the restaurant owner who'd shared his story, all the moments of unscheduled beauty he'd learned to notice. The music was imperfect, unrehearsed, utterly inefficient. It was also the most beautiful thing he'd heard all week. When the music ended, an elderly man on the bench next to him spoke up. "Beautiful evening for this kind of magic, isn't it?" "What do you mean by magic?" Marcus asked. "When people come together just to create something beautiful with no agenda except joy, that's magic in my book." Marcus thought about the promotion offer, the opportunity to optimize thousands of lives into efficient, productive systems. What if someone offered you the chance to make this more efficient, scheduled, planned, optimized for maximum musical output? The old man chuckled. "Son, you'd kill the magic. Some of life's best moments happen in the spaces between plans." The next morning, Marcus called his boss. "I'm grateful for the opportunity," he said, "but I'm going to decline the promotion." The silence on the other end was profound. "Marcus, are you feeling all right? This isn't like you." "You're right," Marcus said, smiling as he looked out his window at the unscheduled sunshine. "It's exactly like me, the me I'm becoming." 2 years later, Marcus had left Optimal Solutions entirely. He'd taken a job with a nonprofit organization that helped people find work-life balance, using his expertise in productivity to teach others how to be efficiently human rather than efficiently mechanical. His apartment looked different now. The atomic clock was gone, replaced by a simple analog watch. His walls held paintings he'd made in a class where failure was not just expected, but celebrated. Books of poetry sat next to productivity guides, and a guitar he was slowly learning to play leaned against the corner. Most mornings still began with coffee and review of the day ahead, but now his schedule included items like Wonder Time and Possibility Space and Adventures TBD. The 7-year-old explorer he'd buried under decades of optimization had finally been given permission to emerge. Some days he felt clumsy and uncertain, like a child learning to walk again. Other days he felt more alive than he had since childhood. On this particular Tuesday morning, exactly 2 years after his first session with Dr. Williams, Marcus woke without an alarm and lay in bed for 10 unmeasured minutes, listening to birds outside his window and feeling grateful for the gift of unscheduled time. His phone showed 3 notifications instead of 37. His calendar had space in it. His life had room to breathe. At exactly 6:47 a.m., Marcus got up to make coffee, not because it was scheduled, but because he wanted to. The difference, he'd learned, was everything. Have you ever scheduled your life so efficiently that you forgot to live it? Sometimes the most important moments are the ones that can't be planned, measured, or optimized. They can only be experienced. Names and details changed for privacy, inspired by Jungian therapeutic principles.